Let's look at how you can write macros in the system. So I'm gonna open this macro and look at the part of the screen. Here in the main part will be placed macro operators. We can see a list of special objects at the right side. These objects help us with writing those macros, and in the menu view we can turn on a variable area where the values of the variables obtained as a result of macro execution will be placed. We can use this button to add records and assign values to each variable. The macro text is written directly in each line, and in order to write a macro text we should update the line at first. We're able to change variables as well, or like this. We can also create a tree structure and one more tree structure under this line, and so on. So we're able to split and group macro code this way, and these arrows here allow us to move records up and down, right or left, as well as entire tree structure. Such a tree structure doesn't change in order of macro execution. We need it only visually because it's easy to analyze. It allows us to collapse or expand macro code in order to determine a line where each of those macros are written and what is the function of these macros. On top of that, we're able to cut these records and paste in another place, copy and paste somewhere as well, and so on. In addition, there are export import buttons, of course, in order to export a macro text and import it another macro text. We can also collapse or expand entire tree structure by using these buttons. Very important, these buttons here, because these are macro execution buttons. We can see those buttons in the menu tools as well, or use these keys on the keyboard in order to execute macros. For example, I'm gonna press this run macro button, and as you can see, macro is executed. So here at the bottom of the screen, we can find those variables which are used in this macro and see values each of those variables. And now let's look at this next step button. This is macro execution step by step. For example, by each press, we can find out how each of those macro lines will be executed and see values of these variables, or during the execution we can break macro by using this button and start execution from the beginning. On top of that, if macro is large, so we have to test macro execution in a certain part. In this case, we can set breakpoints in different places, run macro again, and the system will stop in the place where breakpoint has been set. Then we have to go on execution step by step, run it again until the next breakpoint, and so on. And this way we can check how the macro is executed step by step. When we make sure that macro execution is correct, we can remove these breakpoints by using this button, or if we need to remove one of them, we should select this breakpoint and press this button again, and we should use this button to save created macro before we close this screen. And this button here is used when we have macro which is bound to the form, or specific macro which has transmitted values to its macro text. Now let's close this screen and move to the menu Accounting, Results and Balances in order to see what will be transmitted to the macro from this screen. I'm gonna select, for example, this record and move to the Form Options screen. As you can see, drill down macros are already programmed here, so I'm gonna select one of them, open the macro text, and see what will be transmitted to this macro. So we should press this construct button and then drop down this variable field. As you can see here, two tables are transmitted. The first table is the one that exists in the form. In this case, we moved here from the balance screen, so it's a table which has been formed there. And the second table shows the row number in which the selected record is placed. As you may remember, we selected account 1200 on the balance screen, which is in the 7th row as shown in the second table. Now let's close this screen. And one more detail, we can also select several records here. For example, 1200, 1210, 1410, and move to the screen of macro again. To see transmitted tables, I'm gonna press this button and drop. This table shows that 3 records are transmitted, which are in 7th, 15th, and 16th rows. So let's look at the first table. As you can see, account 1200 is in the 7th row. 1210 and 15th and 1410 and 16th as shown in the second table. And how we can use this information in macro programming, we'll discuss this later. Another thing which is transmitted to the macro from such screens is object values of period, currency, and cost center. Let's look at those variables. So let's shrink this screen, close this one, and look at this object here. These are parameters which have been used to form balance screen. In this case, we have such objects in many forms, and parameters of this screen will be transmitted to the macro as well. So let's look at this macro. We can see here, for example, the date when the balances were formed. We can also see that consolidation was formed, as well as find out whether the selected currency was on the screen or not, and so on. this information transmitted from the screen of parameters in order to analyze the balances in this case. Now I'm gonna return to the screen of parameters and select, for example, currency, Joe Larry, and the date 2019. Okay. And now let's move to the macro again. Press this button and look at transmitted parameters. And as you can see, the year 2019 has been formed and the currency $, has been transmitted from the screen of parameters as we selected there recently. So we can move to macro from any screen and transmit parameters of this screen or form to the macro and then program this macro that way.